Well, good morning, Riverwood, and Happy New Year. Okay, let's try this again. Happy New Year. Oh, hey, there's some enthusiasm. New decade, new year, and I get to be the first to welcome you to the first service of the decade. So welcome here. My name is Kirsten, and I attend the Factory 915, so I feel very much at home here. And if you're joining us online, whether it's because you're traveling or just didn't get here today, or because there's no Riverwood kids and you're not going to brave the service without that, we're glad you're joining us online. Just a reminder to parents, this is the week that you remember why you love the Riverwood Kids volunteers and staff. And so don't forget to give them a great big hug and thank you next week. But for the kids that are here, I'm super glad you're joining us. And I will need your help in a little bit, so don't fall asleep yet, okay? So we have been doing, there's lots of New Year's resolutions going on right now, but one thing that's already a habit for some of us is reading one chapter of the Bible every day. Our goal is, as a church, to do this for 1,000 days, which will get us through the entire Bible. I have lost track where we are in this. I think somewhere between day 200 or day 300, I have no idea. But we've been doing it long enough that for some of us, it's already a habit. And if it's not for you, New Year's resolution time, great time to start. We started on January 1st in the book of Ezekiel, so easy to catch up, to start on Ezekiel chapter 1. And one thing I promise you with the book of Ezekiel is you will not be bored. Weirded out? Yes. Confused? Probably. Wondering if you've gone crazy? Absolutely, yes. These things will all happen in the book of Ezekiel, but you will not be bored. See, Ezekiel is a bit of a strange book. It's one that we sometimes avoid in church circles because not everyone knows what to make of it. For example, chapter 1 starts with Ezekiel having this vision, and in this vision are these living creatures. He doesn't even have a name for them because they have 4 faces, each of them. A face like a person, a face like an eagle, a face like an ox, and a face like, I've forgotten, but a bear maybe? A lion, a face like a lion. And so they're strange, and they're flying, and they're on these wheels, and the wheels are covered with eyes, and they're going this way and that way, and you read it, and you would be forgiven if at the end you were just scratching your head saying, what just happened? I don't recommend Googling Ezekiel. You get all the crazies that way. But if you do, here's one theory that was really popular in the 1970s. One man, Joseph Blumrich, and he wasn't the only one, but he wrote a book on it, on how he believed Ezekiel chapter 1 was actually the first story of aliens visiting Earth. And you might laugh or you might wonder where this comes from, but here's the thing. This guy was a NASA engineer. So he's not coming across this crazy. He's actually including blueprints and technical specs of what Ezekiel is describing could actually be an alien ship. And this caught on so well that not only was this widely believed in the 70s, but there was a TV show on it. A TV show all about how science proves that aliens had been visiting the ancients since the ancient of time. And this, the bumper video, the video that started the series off, started with a reading of Ezekiel chapter 1. It was incredibly popular. It's not so much today. Whether there's aliens or not, I don't know, but I don't believe that Ezekiel chapter 1 is talking about that. In fact, I'm going to suggest that what sounds weird and crazy to us actually was not a confusing message to Ezekiel, but a reassuring message to Ezekiel. What we look at and go, what is he talking about, made total sense to him. Maybe. And one reason I think this is because I think Ezekiel 1 starts with a sanity statement. You know how it is in the movies. Whenever someone hits their head really hard or starts talking crazy, there's a few questions we always ask, like, how many fingers am I holding up? What's your name? Where do you live? Who's the president? What year is it? And if you can answer these questions, then maybe you're going to be okay. Well, listen to how Ezekiel starts his book. In my 30th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kebar River, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. On the 5th month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kebar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. It's almost like he's saying, I'm not crazy. I know my name, I know what year it is, I know where I am, and I know who's the king. I know I sound crazy, but I'm not. But not only does this give us his sanity statement, as I like to think about it, but it also gives us a very exact date and time in history. In fact, Ezekiel is one of the books we can best date in history, which means that maybe this time and date kind of matters. So I would like to invite any of the kids who are here today who are feeling a little brave to come up on stage, and we're going to teach out to the adults what this history was like. So if you're a kid and you're willing, come up on stage right now, please. We've got some stairs over here, and we'll sweeten the deal a little bit too, saying we've got some kid bucks that you can spend later on in Riverwood Kids if you give it a try. All right, we've got some eager ones here. Awesome. Woo. Papers. Okay, thank you. Not sure how important that is. We'll get to it. Thanks, Chris. Awesome. Look at this. Well done. Okay, so we need a few things here. We need an evil king. Here, you have to put the beard on first. And we need... Wonderful. I'm going to get you to come stand over here, right up here, so we can see you really well, okay? Beard's a little big for you, eh? That's all right. And I need God. Just to be clear, you're not God, but you're going to represent God for us today. Do you want to stand up there just so we can see you really well? All right. So we also have two countries going on here. This is the land of Israel. About as tall as it gets. And over here, we have Babylon.
I have a guitar like that at my home.
Do you really? Can you play it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to get everybody to move over to Israel to start with. So you're going to have to crowd in a little bit.
Okay.
Except you. You go over there to Babylon. Everyone else, we're going to be people of Israel right now. All the way over here. Well done. Okay. So here's how this history goes. The people of Israel had been slaves for hundreds and hundreds of years. But God, you can wave over there. Yes, God promised them that he would get them out of slavery and bring them to a really good land, the promised land. And this land would have great food, and it would be safe, and they'd have homes. It would be wonderful. And so that's what he promised, and that's what happened. He gave them the land of Israel, and he freed them from slavery. Now, he also gave them commandments, which sounds terrible, but these commandments are a little bit like Christmas gifts. Can you imagine a rule that's as good as a Christmas gift?
Look, I have a key.
Yes, keys do great things. Well, this rule, here's one example. So these people had been slaves for hundreds of years. They had not had a day off in hundreds of years. And one of God's first rules is every day, take a day off. Or every week, take a day off. Good rule? Bad rule? Good rule, exactly. No chores, no school, 1 day a week. No problem. Here's another one. Where they used to be in Egypt, the Egyptians were always killing them. They were always being beaten up, and they were always being killed, and there was nothing they could do. They felt helpless. And God said, no killing anyone. Good rule or bad rule?
Good rule.
Good rule. These are easy. So God had commandments to help keep his people safe, and here's the best part. He said, I'm going to live with you. Everyone else, their God lived up there, and they lived down there. But God said, I want to live with you people. And they built a temple, and God's presence came, and he lived with them. Everything was good. Over here, very different story. You make a great evil king. So in Babylon, they are not worshiping God. They're not following God. In fact, he thinks he pretty much is a god. Well done. But you guys over here, you start looking at him and you go, he looks really powerful, doesn't he? Take a step this way. Look at that crown. He looks really rich, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Take a step this way. In fact, he looks like he gets to do whatever he wants, and we have all these commandments. I'd rather do whatever I want. Take another step this way. Okay, I'm going to get you to face the parents because they're the ones that really want to see you. So they're taking steps towards the king of Babylon, and God knows this is not going to end well. So God sends prophets, and we talked about this a while back at Riverwood Kids. I don't know if you remember, but we said prophets' messages were a little bit like road signs, right? So here's a prophet. He sent a prophet to say, stop what you are doing. This is not a good idea. It's not going to go well. Don't do it. What's this one for? It's a turnaround, a U-turn sound. So he said, prophets, hold it way up where they can see it. He said, prophets saying, turn around. You are going the wrong way. Come back to where you came from. My ways are right. My ways are good. They're meant to protect you. Turn around. Here's another one. Hudson, hold that one up. This one says, road work ahead. And so this was saying, you can't see what's ahead, but I can. And what's ahead is dangerous. I need you to turn around and trust me on this. But God's people didn't listen. If you have a sign, can you turn it around so no one can see it anymore? Yeah, just like that. They didn't listen. And so God said, well, I'm always for your freedom, and you are free to make this choice. So they chose to follow the king of Babylon. And the king of Babylon came, fought them, and took them all as slaves to his country. Oh, so come on over, everyone. You have to come to Babylon now and look tired and exhausted and like he's making you do all the hard work for no pay. Why, exactly? These are phenomenal actors. Can you give them a hand? You can take your props and go bring them to Miss Michelle there, who's sitting on, who she'll wave, and she also has your kid bucks. So go get one from her, and thank you very much. You can give them to Michelle. She's sitting over there. So if you are ever wondering what to do with your time, Riverwood Kids does that kind of thing every week, and they're so fun to be with, so highly recommend. So this is where the story starts. Ezekiel is one of these people who's been taken as prisoners and is living in a foreign country of Babylon. God is over here, and God's people are far from God. In fact, if I could sum up this whole point of history right now, I'd say it's with this: far from God. It's their own fault. They were the ones rejecting God's rules. They were the ones rejecting God's ways. But whatever the case, they find themselves here and God over there. And Ezekiel is sitting by the banks of a river, feeling alone, feeling forgotten, feeling like everything has fallen apart. And it's into this place in history that God speaks. As I looked, I saw a great storm coming from the north, driving before it a huge cloud that flashed with lightning and shone with brilliant light. There was a fire inside the cloud, and in the middle of the fire glowed something like gleaming amber. From the center of the cloud came 4 living beings that looked human, except each had 4 faces and 4 wings. They went in whatever direction the Spirit chose, and they moved straight forward in any direction without turning around. The living beings looked like bright coals of fire or brilliant torches, and lightning seemed to flash back and forth among them. And the living beings darted to and fro like flashes of lightning. This is astonishing. This is crazy. This is unbelievable, because what Ezekiel thinks is happening is God is showing up. But God lives over there. He is the God of Israel. He has a temple that is his home. He promised to dwell with his people, and Ezekiel is far from that. How can that even happen? There is a God in Babylon, and it's not this one. God is not welcome here. How can God show up? And he has this picture of these 4-faced beasts, these 4-faced living creatures. And it's almost like he is feeling like God has turned his back on them, and God is saying, I don't have a back. I can't turn my back on you. He is feeling like he is far from God, and God is saying, but I go where I want. I am not confined by the borders like you think I am. You call me the God of Israel, but I am the God of the universe. God comes near. They thought they were out of God's reach, but God shows them these beings that go to and fro wherever the Spirit leads and says, there is no place you can go that is out of my reach. They thought God was confined to his temple, but God shows up saying, I go wherever I please. And we kind of laugh at this idea that God would be stuck in Israel, like God could ever be stuck. But don't we sometimes think that way too? Like God lives in the church. God lives where good people are. That you would never find God at work, at school, in a bar, at a party. God would never be there. God wouldn't be welcome there. But God shows up in the most unlikely places because he is always coming after his people. Luke chapter 15 is full of one story after another of Jesus talking about this, of the prodigal son, of God going to find his lost son, of the lost coin, of God searching everywhere for that coin, of the lost sheep, of God going to extreme lengths to find the one that didn't make it home. God shows up in unlikely places. My uncle tells a story. He grew up in a Christian home, but he rejected his faith, he rejected his parents, he wanted nothing to do with them, and went as far away from them as he could. So he became a drug hustler. His job was to bring the drugs from South America to Canada, and en route one day, he had stopped at a drug den and was having a party with some friends, as he often did this, and as he's tripping out, he has a dream of Jesus. Jesus showed up in a drug den where he was not welcome, where he was not invited, but Jesus was pursuing him. And he says from that day forward, he knew everything had to change. If God was going to find him there, then this God was worth following. And he's been a missionary now for 40 years. God shows up in the most unlikely places, and you are never too far from him. Paul says it this way in the book of Romans. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. The people were here not because they were victims of some crime, although some were. Many of them were there because they rejected God. And God still sought them out. God came near. And these beings with these four faces and these wheels with the eyes all around, God sees you. You may feel forgotten by God. You may feel abandoned by God. You may feel like you've gone too far for God to ever find you. But God sees you. Sometimes it feels like the spotlight is on someone else. These people are getting all of God's blessings and you're getting none. And God sends this vision to Ezekiel saying, I see you, Ezekiel. By the rivers of Kabar, in exile, I see you. There's a name for God. It's El Roi, and it means the God who sees. And what I love about this name is it's a name given to God, not by one of the saints in the Bible, but by one of the sinners. See, it's given to God by a woman named Hagar. And if you've forgotten who Hagar is, you can be forgiven because she's not the hero in the story. Abraham is the hero in the story. Sarah might be a hero in the story, but Hagar certainly isn't. And God promises Abraham and Sarah a son. But as the years go by and they don't have one, they decide to take matters into their own hand. And Hagar becomes Abraham's lover, and she bears him a son. And things don't go well for her, as you might imagine. And so by the time Sarah has a son as well, there's so much jealousy going on. And as Sarah is the rightful heir, Hagar gets kicked out. She gets thrown out of the house. And she finds herself in the desert with her kid, alone, desperate, and about to die. And in that place, God shows up. Not to Abraham, not to Sarah, not to these people who bear God's promise, but to Hagar. He shows up, and he saves her life. He points her to a well, and he speaks to her, and she gives him this name. Genesis 16, verses 13 to 14 says, Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, You are the God who sees me. She also said, Have I truly seen the one who sees me? So that well was named Bir Lahai Ruah, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. Some of us are making grand New Year's resolutions of things we want to change. Some of us have dreams for the future, but maybe some of us just need a new name for God in 2020. El Roi, the God who sees you. God is also sovereign. Let's go back to Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 to 28. Above the surface was something that looked like a throne made of blue lapis lazuli. And on this throne, high above, was a figure whose appearance resembled a man. From what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like gleaming amber, flickering like a fire. And from his waist down, he looked like a burning flame, shining with splendor. All around him was a glowing halo, like a rainbow shining in the clouds on a rainy day. This is what the glory of the Lord looked like to me. When I saw it, I fell face down on the ground, and I heard someone's voice speaking to me. God is on his throne. If there ever was a time to doubt God's sovereignty. If there was ever a time to wonder if he actually was in control, or maybe he'd left the building, this was it. Israel was losing a war. His people were now prisoners again in a foreign country. And although he doesn't know it, soon the temple will be destroyed, completely destroyed. If there was ever a time to wonder if God was real or if he had any control at all, this is it. But it's also, this is when God shows up on his throne. Now, in our day and age, if we want to see someone arriving in power, they might come in a big motorcade of limousines with lots of security, maybe some fighter jets overhead, just for extra protection, bodyguards everywhere. That might be what this would look like in our day and age. But in Ezekiel's time, kings came being carried by 4 beasts or 4 people on their throne. And they would try to look as spectacular as they could. If you've seen Aladdin, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. They have a throne and it's got jewels all over it, and they're trying to wear their most impressive clothes because they are trying to tell people, I am rich and I am powerful. And it's in this situation, in this place in history, that God shows up being carried not by people and not by beasts, but by representation of everything. These 4-faced beasts represent all humanity, all domesticated beasts, all wild beasts, and all birds of the air, and they are all servants of God. And then not only that, but he doesn't come with a throne with a few jewels on it. His throne is a jewel. And his clothes aren't just really nice, they're so dazzling he can hardly look at it. And Ezekiel doesn't say, I saw God. He doesn't even say, I saw the glory of God. He says, I saw the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God, because that's how amazing it was. God comes to Ezekiel on the throne saying, I know it looks terrible, but I am still sovereign. I am still in control. I still am on the throne. God comes near. God sees you. God is sovereign. Even when everything's falling apart, he is still on the throne. And God has a plan for you. Ezekiel chapter 3. The voice said to me, Son of man, eat what I am giving to you. Eat this scroll. Then go give its message to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll. Fill your stomach with this, he said. And when I ate it, it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said, Son of man, go to the people of Israel and give them my messages. There's something important about the timing of this vision for Ezekiel. You see, Ezekiel has introduced himself as a priest, but it's not true. You see, to be a priest, you not only have to be born in a priestly family, which he was, but you also have to spend your first 30 years preparing to become a priest. So by the time someone in the priestly family, a boy like this, was 12, he would have memorized the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Kids, that's like 5,800 verses. How are you doing with that? It's a lot, right? Yeah. So that's the kind of preparation it took to be a priest, and you were not allowed to even start serving in the temple until you turned 30. And then from the times you're 30 to 50, you actually get to serve as a priest, and at 50 you retire and start training the next generation. But we know that Ezekiel has been in exile 5 years, and he's turning 30 now. It's his 30th year. So he might have prepared to become a priest. He's probably done a lot to get to that point, but he will never serve in the temple. Since the time he was 25, he's been as far away from that temple as he could, and he doesn't know it, but that temple will be destroyed in just a few years. He's prepared to be a priest, but he has never served as a priest. And as he's sitting here on or near his 30th birthday, you have to believe there's going to be some grief of the life that could have been. Some sorrow over broken dreams and disappointments. Today should have been the day he started serving in the temple, but here he is, and that plan is now ashes. It's the anniversary of a death of a loved one. It's one more negative on those pregnancy tests. It's walking by that empty room again, or hearing that someone else got the job that you were in line for. It's one more friend announcing their engagement and you're still single. It's getting those divorce papers. It's that cutting, bitter edge. 30 years old and too far away to ever live out his calling. 30 years of study, of school, of preparation. For what? It's all gone now. And in that moment, God says, stand up, Ezekiel. I have a plan for you. It's an impossible plan. It's a plan that had already been given up on. But God is offering him another chance. He says, I need a spokesperson for my people here. I need someone to be my messenger in Babylon. Will you be that? You won't get a pulpit like you would have in the temple. Instead, you get a street corner. You don't get gatherings every week like we do here. Instead, you're going to have to get their attention. And as we read Ezekiel over the next month or two, he gets their attention all right in some surprising ways. His calling remained even when it seemed impossible. And he's not the only one in the Bible to have this happen. I'm reminded of Moses. When he was a young man, he was called to lead God's people out of Egypt, but he went totally wrong. He committed a crime and he had to go on the run. And it's not till he's 80 years old that God finds him in a foreign country and says, it's time, Moses. It's time. I have a plan for you. Let's go back. And when Moses is 80, he goes back and starts the process to lead his people to freedom. You are never too old for God's plan. Your mistakes are not too big for God's plan. Or Jonah, who's called to preach to Nineveh, but doesn't want to do it, so goes the opposite direction. And he's thrown overboard into the ocean, and God has to send a fish to swallow him up. And when he's in the fish, he says, God, whatever you want. I can die here, but if I live, I'll go. So the fish actually spits him out, and he's headed to Nineveh. Even his rebellion didn't disqualify him from God's plan for his life. Or Mary, she's this virgin living in Nazareth, called to be the mother of God, but God is supposed to be born in Bethlehem, and so God has to change the government regulations so that she gets sent to Bethlehem and impregnates her with his Holy Spirit to make this happen. Your social standing does not disqualify you from God's plan. Your lack of credentials does not disqualify you. Even who you are or where you are does not disqualify you from God's plan. He has a plan for your life. Still, even now, even after everything. But you have a say in it. God is for our freedom. And as we saw in our little history, over and over again, he fights for the freedom of his people, and he's still fighting for your freedom, which means he doesn't conscript. He doesn't force. He invites. He offers Ezekiel a choice and says, eat this scroll. And Ezekiel doesn't have to. He actually has to take out his hand and eat the scroll. He has to make a choice to choose to accept God's plan, to choose to accept God's sovereignty, to choose to be a part of what God is doing, not only in his life, but with the entire people of Israel. He says yes. He ate the scroll. God invites us too. Revelation says Jesus stands at the door and knocks. He's wanting that, or he invites us to be part of this, but he's not going to force his way in. Will you eat that scroll? To accept his invitation is to let God's words become a part of you. Let them grow in you. Let them sustain you. Let them nourish you. Let them be part of who you are. For Ezekiel to say yes, he not only had to have a revelation of God, have an understanding of who God is, but he had to be willing for his words to take root in his heart and in his life. So, will you accept this invitation? This invitation to trust him as the God who comes near, whose presence is with you wherever you go, no matter how crazy it may seem. God is near. His invitation to hope in the God who sees, El Roi, the one that you cannot hide from, and when you think you're hidden, you're still not, because he has eyes everywhere and he sees you. Your sins, your mistakes, your pain, and your heartache do not keep you from the God who sees you. His invitation to trust the God who's sovereign, who despite when everything feels like it's falling apart, is still on his throne. Will you follow that God? His invitation to participate in his plan for you, that plan that seems impossible, that plan that seems so far away, that plan that seems like there's no hope for it to ever happen. You're not too old. You're not too young. You're not too broken. You're not too far away. You're not too rebellious. You're not too anything for God to have a plan in your life. And last, his invitation to let his word nourish and sustain you, to be reading, to be listening, to be praying, to be talking it out, to be even questioning and wrestling with what you read in this word. Will you let it grow and take root inside you? Will you eat that scroll? We're going to close with Ezekiel 3, verses 10 and 11. Then he added, Son of man, let all my words sink deep into your own heart first. Listen to them carefully for yourself. Then go to your people in exile and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Do this whether they listen to you or not. Let my words sink into your own heart first. Listen to them carefully for yourself. As we're doing this 1,000-day challenge, it's not Pastor Todd reading the word for us, although it can be really helpful to go on his blog, especially when we're reading through books like Ezekiel, just to get some ideas. But he's saying it has to come from you. You are the one that has to accept that invitation. And as we keep reading this book, Ezekiel's going to do crazy things to get the attention of the people of Israel. He is on fire for God, and this vision, this bizarre, weird, eyes everywhere, four-faced, living creature's vision isn't something that confused him. It's something that reassured him. And it says he fell on his knees and he worshiped this God who came near, this God who saw him, this God who had a plan for him and who is still sovereign. God sees you. Wherever you are, he sees you. He loves you, and he's calling you too. Will you accept his invitation?